So from there, this is the notice to make a motion, and they look over all of those. The committee on this from the Standards Council, the motion committee will take a look at those and certify the ones that they want to move forward, and then those will be debated at the annual meetings, and then at that point, stage 4 is when it becomes a new standard and takes effect about 20 days after. So if you are looking for more information on this process, you want to get involved, you can go to our website, and under Codes and Standards, you can find 2 great pieces of information that you can download for free, and they go over the process thoroughly so you can look through that. How many people currently serve on committees right now? This whole front row. Look at these, the studious ones that sit up front, right? Here they are. So if you're interested, and we always encourage you, please do consider getting involved. And you can go to that Codes and Standards and look through a list of our Codes and Standards, and you'll see, in fact, I'll go to the next slide, you'll see a spot for, don't do that yet, technical committee, and you can find out the staff liaison, and then you can apply to that committee if you're interested. You can also find on this page, and I use 70 as an example here, where that standard is in its cycle, and then you can also click on that middle button there. I want to bring this to your attention. If you are an NFPA member or you are an AHJ, then you have the opportunity to ask technical questions. And I don't know if everybody is aware of that or not. Are people using that? A lot of people use that for technical questions. See some people going, maybe. Well, you should. So that is there for you as well. Okay, so I want to share some resources with you. But before that, I'm going to ask you a question, and here it is. So you guys, you all have to play along, because this is how it works. I want you to, and don't be embarrassed because no one has to know the answer to this, okay, but you gotta raise your hand at some point, that's the rule. Okay, so compared to 1980, how likely are you today to perish from a home fire? Here are your choices. I'll give you a second to think about it. How many people think it's 5% more likely? Got one. 20% more likely. Couple. 20% less likely. More hands. How many think it's 80% less likely? A lot. Okay. The answer is you are 20% more likely to die in a home fire today. And I'll tell you why. Let me make sure that I clarify this. We have fewer home fires today than we had in the 80s. That's a good thing, okay? That number is declining overall. Fewer home fires. But if you should have a home fire today, you are 20% more likely to die in that fire. And I'll tell you why. Because we have open floor plans, we have lightweight construction materials in our homes, we have materials that are held together by glues, we have synthetics everywhere, and synthetics put off a high level of noxious gas, smoke. We all know that smoke inhalation is typically what kills people in a fire. And if you just even look around this room, every bit of the materials around us are synthetic. So when we have that combined with these open floor plans where fire is not contained, stopped by a door, and rolls through your home, fires burn much hotter and faster than they ever have. Now, 30 years ago, it would take from the point, the inception of a fire, to what we call a flashover, when the whole room is hot enough to become combustible and it's filled with fire. 30 years ago, it took about 30 minutes for that to occur. Today, anybody want to take a guess what the time frame is from the point that fire started? Oh, I got a hand in the back. Yes, sir.
10 minutes.
He guesses 10. Anybody want to guess anything else? 250. I feel like the price is right. What's that? How long it takes from a point of ignition of a fire in a room to when the whole room is engulfed, fully engulfed? 30 seconds? 2 minutes. You're right, it's under 2 minutes. It's under 2 minutes when you're unable to survive in that room. Okay, so, yeah. So so important that we have working smoke alarms in our home, and that's a message that I always want to share out there. But home fires are still a problem. We still lose about 3,000 people annually to home fires, and I wanted to take a look at the leading causes. So we typically talk about 4 leading causes when it comes to home fires. The first one has maintained its position for quite a long time, and that's cooking. Cooking can be explained pretty easily in what we call unattended cooking. So people start something on the stovetop and they forget, they fall asleep, they pass out, and so we see the leading cause as cooking. Underneath that, heating, and the third leading cause is electrical. So really important that we're, again, informing the public, educating people on ways that they can reduce electrical fires in their home. So I want to share some materials that we have with you. We have at NFPA for you. We do a lot of work with ESFI, and are you guys familiar with that entity? Electrical Safety Foundation International. So we co-brand some materials. We recognize May as Fire Safety Month, Electrical Safety Month, and we have some great materials available on our website. Now, I don't know, how many of you are contractors or own your own businesses? I figured there, okay, so there's a large number. So I wanted to make you aware of these materials because it's something that you could share on a website, or if you do any social media, we've got some nice pieces there. We've got fantastic things like tip sheets that can be downloaded, shared with customers, clients, and you can add your business information at the bottom of those sheets. So also home safety checklists when it comes to electrical safety. We also have materials around electric shock drowning. That's a space that we have been in as well because it obviously involves electricity. And we want to make sure that we've got materials for free. These are all materials for free, but we have materials that talk to swimmers, boaters, boat owners, marina owners, pool owners, spa owners, making sure that they're maintaining their equipment and they know the risks of electric shock drowning. We just, in Traverse City, we just had, I think probably 5 or 6 years ago, we had a couple of young teenage boys that dove off in our city marina, and both were killed by electric shock drowning. And it terrified me because that's the marina that we boat in. We had fallen into the water there before, and so knowing that we shouldn't swim in it because it's just gross, first of all, but if you happen to get in it, you know, the risks of electric shock drowning were really frightening. So NFPA has been doing a lot of work over the last several years. The interesting thing about this too is that there's not a lot of really good hard data on electric shock drowning because it can oftentimes be categorized simply under drowning. And so a lot of the information we've gathered has been anecdotal. We wrote an article about it in our journal. And so we're just trying to do a much better effort in that area to bring information and more research on that as well. And so that information is there for you. And the thing I was going to say about the electric shock drowning too is that I am seeing, and I don't know about all of you, but when you visit marinas, there's a lot more signage today than there ever has been about those risks. We have some great videos, so if you have the opportunity to share those or are interested in those, we even have one in American Sign Language, and also one that features Dan Doofus, if you're a fan of Dan Doofus. If you don't know Dan, you're going to hop on the website and check him out. He's meant for like adult humor because he does everything wrong. We know he shouldn't teach kids to do, don't do this bad thing. We just want to tell them the good things to do. And again, social media. We have quite a bit available for social media, so if you want to totally nerd out on electrical safety, you can share this on your social media. You can put it on your Facebook, or if you're someone who tweets, we have all these great things available. And then infographics. So infographics is the new big thing because we know that people have such a short attention span these days. So if you're going to get their attention, you can't put up a big long thing to read. You've got to just give them something, short and sweet. So these are a great way visually to share safety information about electrical safety. The last thing in the list of resources here is I wanted to make sure that you're aware of all the great reports and charts that are available at NFPA. I know one of the speakers early this morning was mentioning all the research that is done at NFPA, and we have a great research foundation. And so take advantage of those reports. There are reports on electricity that cover commercial, residential, workplace, electrical hazards, marina safety. There's some real specific reports on arc fires and all kinds of different things. So, and I always suggest to people to hop on there and just download the executive summary, because it gives you a quick down and dirty on what's on there without actually reading the entire report, unless you want to, and you can have some nice nighttime reading. Okay, now a couple of resources for you on your job. I just have really three that I'm going to share with you. This first one, NFPA 70E, and I know a lot of you are required to align with 70E, and we put together some training that was OSHA requested, and so this is now available. Has anybody in here taken 70E, the training through NFPA? A few people, yeah, team. You have to, Christine? Yes, I have as well, and they've done a nice job with it. So there's three different ways that you can take this training. There is the online version, which we've moved a lot of our training to online, and that was really happening before the pandemic, but it really has bolstered the way that we're delivering training. So you can do that online training, you can purchase the whole bundle, or you can pick a la carte. There is also the option of the live virtual, which there are some dates coming up in August and November for that. And I will tell you that that training is a little bit more expensive, but it gives you the opportunity to ask those live questions. A lot of people are more comfortable with that setting. And then there's some state-approved trainings as well. NFPA is working to customize training so they meet state requirements for folks that need the 70E training. Right now we have just 2 states, Washington and New Jersey. So that may be something that you want to consider in Michigan at some point, but wanted to let you know that this is available. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is our new digital resource, Link. And I'm going to ask you again, how many people are familiar with Link? Okay, just a handful, so this is a great opportunity. So, as I mentioned, NFPA had been moving to a more digital platform for quite a while, and then in September we rolled out our NFPA Link, and the concept behind this is that it would contain eventually all of our codes and standards. And I'm going to move to just an online view for you here. What do I do with my glasses? Oh boy. Okay, so I thought it would be best to share this with you live to give you a look at this. So again, the goal was to create an online digital format where we could house all of our codes and standards, and it would be through a mobile device that you could access wherever you are and whatever mobile platform that you like best. And so the first documents that we added were our most widely used standards. So 70 was the first one, and we also rolled out the 2020 NEC edition at the same time. So that dovetailed really nicely. And then from there we added 1 and 101 and 13, and then they just got going like crazy. The goal is to have all the codes and standards, the current editions up by September, October, the fall time. And they're going to have no problem doing that. They've been really cooking along and getting these on, and now they're going and adding past editions as well. So I know Michigan's on the 2017 NEC, and it is up and on there. And so you can still purchase your code books. I will tell you that the sad news is your PDFs are going away. So this is the direction that we're going overall as an association, and I think you're going to really like this this tool. So when you go to login, and when you go to the NFPA homepage, right at the top it'll say NFPA link. Click on that and it brings you to the sign-in page. And then this is the dashboard experience that you will have once you hop on there. So I'll tell you that it's kind of over here on, let's see what your left, my left as well. You've got your navigation bar. This center portion is whatever you create, that's your customized view, and I'll let you know how to do that. And then over here on the right-hand side is our chance to communicate with you through how to use the tool, frequently asked questions, and another really nice thing is that Link will pop up and give you a window to tell you when there's updates. So for example, yesterday when I got to the hotel, I opened it up and a window came up and it said, we've just updated our search tool. And so it lets you know when any of those things are updated. So when you're looking for publications, and you can see that I've populated a few here of the ones that I use, you can also go down to the bottom and view all of the publications. So I'm going to give you a quick look at that. And so from there you can scroll through from one to whatever document that you are looking for. Just want to make sure I've got my notes here so I don't leave anything out. And so you could actually go down, scroll down, and get to, I'm going to use 70 as our overall example today because that seemed fitting. So here we've got NFPA 70, and the 2020 version is what I'm going to open. Now I could have also just on that first page just gone right to my, it's on my favorites and clicked on there. But this allows you to search any of those. And then you can see from here that this looks exactly like the code book looks. It's the same layout. You can search all of the articles from there. You can hop into any of these and take a look. I just clicked on Chapter 2, Wiring and Protection, and then we'll give it a second.
While you're loading, if I may,
yes.
Michigan's on the 2017 policy still. Just to make it clear, that is in there. The last 4 cycles, the 2020 is in there being the most current, but it goes back to 2011 as far as the EC cycle. Not every senior does it that far back, but because we know that EC is kind of spread out across the nation of what people are using.
Thank you, Corey. So this seems to be moving really slow. So this is going to be a really lame demonstration unless our internet picks up. Or I do have a backup plan so we can just look at some screenshots. I'm going to see if we can refresh it. Oh, nice work. Who said that? Thank you, sir. Okay, so now you see your articles over here. You can jump in. You can see that I bookmarked this, but I'm going to have you take a look at what this looks like. Okay, so you can see, you can scroll down in your article, in your sections here. There's an opportunity, if I click on this expand, you get your enhanced content. I'm actually going to give you a different view of another one because we've got some nice, this one's got a nice visual. So these are meant to work similarly to the handbook. So it's, you can find these all together. So where you would go back and reference the handbook for some of this enhanced content, commentary, you can find that right inside link here. And you can always collapse those if you want a clean view. The other thing it allows you to do, you see these 3 little dots here in the corner, and if you click on those, it gives you a few different options. So starting from the bottom one, if you find what you're looking for here and something that you'd like to share, you can send that to someone. If you were discussing something in the morning or you're working on a project, you can email them this information. They do not need to be have a link subscription to receive it. That will be live for them for 14 days, and then it goes away. You can always resend it to them. Anybody who is sharing in your link, you can send it to them. You can add it to the content that you curate. And I'm going to click back out of this. The other thing that you can do is you can bookmark. So if you are a person who likes to keep notes in your margin or sticky notes in your book, whatever works for you, you can do something really similar here. You can color code these. If you've got a system that you want to work off of for projects or whatnot, you can add notes. And then it will tell you in your bookmarks when that was created and by whom. And the great thing about this too is that these bookmarks will travel with you. So when you get new additions, you will take those notes with you. And, oops, this is, thought I heard a comment. Okay, we'll hop back out of this. And then the last thing I wanted to point out here is adding to a reference panel, which just had a great conversation about earlier today. And this is something that's been added newly that allows you, when you want to gather content, it could be from the same article, it could be from different standards, and you can add that list so that you can quickly refer to those. And Dean, do you want to just stand up real quick and maybe give because you were sharing an example of how you used it. Yeah, thanks. There's mics there. I'll let you continue over there.
What we've got is the reference panel. So like if you're building a presentation or something like that, you can put all of your code sections, maybe that you've got a presentation that you're going to be using. You would be able to have those in that reference panel. And you could put them like in order of what you are wanting to refer to them. Another option or a tool for AHJ would be if you had a particular job that maybe you were going out looking at, you could pull those particular code sections that you may see or have common violations or something like that and put them in the reference panel. And this reference panel can go across all standards. So we had, Mr. Fox with U of M, you could pull up stuff from 517 as well as NFPA 99 and put that in that reference panel. So it's a really cool feature, and it stays there until you remove it, and you can just put it in there and go through it.
Thanks, Dean. And so a lot of really great features and functionality, and I think you'll see more and more added to this, and we're taking a lot of feedback as well. And the other thing I wanted to mention about the enhanced content is that we can continue to add to that enhanced content, whereas the code will remain the same. But where the handbook came out and that information was static there until the next cycle, with the enhanced content on Link, we can add to that as we go. So that's really a nice feature as well. So I'm going to click back out of that. I wanted to let you know that there's also, if you are someone who likes to know when things have been added, I'm scrolling down to find one. Okay, here we go. So these little delta, this triangle here, the delta indicates a change indicator. So when you get the new additions, you'll be able to still see those highlighted sections. So that's for your convenience there. And then I'm going to go back to my home page here, just to point out again, I have marked these as favorites, and the way that you do that, I'll just give you a quick, you go down to your publications and say, I want to select NFPA 12. I can click on that, and it gives me this option up here to click it as my favorite, and then it's going to remain on my personal page here as an easy reference. So The other thing that you can do is on my favorites, again, I can go ahead and just click right here and it takes me to that same open book page. Along the side here, there are a few other tools. I'm actually going to start from the bottom here. This is our search option, which again, we just had noticed that our search option has improved greatly, and it's really refined the way that you can search and eliminated tons and tons of content that might pop up, that could have popped up earlier. So you can search by keywords, you can put things in quotations that will help you select or search items as well. So that's an option. This little bookmark here will take me to the things that I have bookmarked, and so that's where you'll find that information. I'm going to refresh.
Trick of the trade.
I think I'm showing great restraint because I'm like a button masher. Things don't start working immediately. I start hitting all the buttons, so I'm just going to try to be calm. So we'll give that a second.
Hey, Meredith,
Yes, sir.
one on the search, she spoke about what she was talking about is the search engine allows you to search either across all publications or in a particular publication. So like if you were just looking in NFPA 70, 2017, you could just search that, or you could actually go into that document and search by chapter and stuff like that. So it's really, really refined on that search. So for inspectors, that will really help streamline you on that.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. That's huge when you're trying to locate something quickly. So again, here's the bookmarks that I have. You can also take a look under collections where you might share that with your group that has a subscription to link. I'm not going to click that because I think it's going to get us back on that spinning link right there, but I am going to take us up to this next, which is called NFPA Direct. And this is really cool because it allows you to navigate situationally. So you can start by whatever you want to choose, by occupancy, system, space, or equipment. So I'll just give you a quick look at what this looks like. So I've selected occupancy, and I'm going to select healthcare. And then you can see there's 33 different situations that you can search and find. We'll say I'm going to select the commercial kitchen electrical. And so this takes us to a page, and you can see numerically they've identified different things in that room, in that situation, where you can then go down and make a selection, and it'll take you to, and I'll just do that so that you can see. I'll just do the cooking hood. And now you can see the related resources here. This is our read more. So just a different way to navigate that information. And I'm gonna actually take us through a scenario. I'm gonna do it in a couple different ways. So let's go back here. All right, so this is, again, play along. Now these are actual scenarios, but they're simple things I know you know the answers to already, but I just want to take you through how to find them using links. So the first question is, how many small appliance branch circuits do I need in a kitchen? Okay, so we're going to search the document. So we're going to start with 70, and I'm going to use the 2017 version for you all. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to use the 2020 because that's what we should be using. Okay. Okay, so once you get to the book here, who knows where you're going to look? Where's your best guess on which chapter you're going to look at here?
Chapter 2.
2? Okay, so we're going to select 2. Here are our choices for articles.
210.
Branch circuits.
Not 11.
then we're looking over on the left-hand side here, you can see there's some options here for what we're looking for. Anyone? You guys already know. Okay, 210.11, so we're gonna go down.
You have to scroll, you can't like click.
I don't know, that's a good question, let me see.
Yeah. Did it click?
Yes, look at that, thank you. Okay,
C.
and yep, there we go, Cease, small appliance branch circuits. 210.52B. So that's one way you can locate information that you're trying to find. Now I want to go back here and let's use this tool. So I'll take a volunteer who wants to choose the category. Tim, you don't get to play. Space? Okay, and so our question was, how many small appliance branch circuits do I need in a kitchen? So, is kitchen one of our options here? So that's kind of a no-brainer, so we're gonna go to kitchen. And now it asks us commercial, residential fuel gas. So we know we were looking for residential. And this gives us the visual here. Can you see which one you would want to select? Five?
Or 9.
Or 9, yeah, let's see what 5 says. So 5 says residential light fixtures, low voltage. 9 is residential kitchen counter receptacles. So we're gonna go with 9. So here's our read more. And here we go, you can take a quick look down there and quickly identify your 210.51B. So just a little quick trip on how to do that. So the last thing I'm going to show you is what you have available also, just like the regular code book, is access to the tables and the annexes. And so I just wanted to give you a quick look. We'll look at our tables. Does anybody have anything they'd like to look at in tables? So you can see here your articles. I'll look at rigid PVC conduit. So there again, you've got your tables, and you can scroll through those. Also, up at the top here, you'll see these breadcrumbs. I just learned recently that that's what these are called when it shows you where you found it again. Yeah, that makes sense. So if I want to just back up, that allows me without having to arrow back. And then I just was going to show you the annexes here. And you've got your options over here. Okay, any questions or anybody want to walk through this in any other way? I'm happy to kind of play with it for a few minutes here. Yes, sir.
How much does it cost?
That's a great question.
It's free.
So I'm going to hop back here. It's actually, I'm going to go here and then I'll back up. So you can, is that too tiny to see? Yeah, okay, so the first, there's a free trial, there's a 14-day free trial, and what we've been telling folks is that, 70 and 101.13 came on first, so, but if you're someone like, if you use the 2017 version of 70, then you'd want to wait until that was up. Now that's in there. So But if you're working outside the list, and there's a link, I'm happy to share that, I'll get that to this group, where you can see what's been updated on there for codes and standards. But you can take advantage of that 14-day trial at any point. The membership monthly is $9.99. If you join as a team, it's $40.49. I always love when they do that, 49 cents at the end, for a team to join. And then we also have our enterprise option, and that's large groups will work with your agency, department, entity to try to make something work for you for an enterprise. So, and the nice thing about those teams is you can share some content in there as well, that shared content. So there's prices there. Now, it depends on how you interface with the content, with the standards, what works best for you. I would just say, I think this is like anything else, we're moving in this direction of technology. And I'll tell you, I have often thought about this similarly to like the music industry, where all of a sudden you had music available online and anybody could bootleg it, and it was like, how is this all gonna work? How are the musicians gonna still, make ridiculous incomes and put on concerts and live shows, but get paid for what they're doing, And so, same thing, with our PDFs, a lot of those agreements were being abused, and we're trying to put something in your hands that you have access to. And so, one of the other things is that this is, it works on any device, so it's mobile responsive. So it doesn't mean that if you're using your laptop and you go to your phone, it's just a tinier version on your laptop. It actually responds so that it has a different view on your phone, so that you can still interact with it and have a good experience there. So, of course, if you have other questions, there is a page up on the site for frequently asked questions. I'd encourage you to hop on there and take a look. And then I will also provide for you my contact information. But the last thing, actually we'll pause for any other questions about Link before I tell you about this last resource. Yes, ma'am.
Is it gonna be replacing the fire code subscription?
The question is it going to be replacing the fire code, the NCS, NFCSS, yeah. No, not necessarily. You'll still have access, but like I said, for the PDFs, and I think you might see down the road at some point, Christine, but for right now, you can still have and I hope I'm not speaking out of line, Dean and Corey, jump in if you want to be more accurate about the NFCSS, where that will remain. PDFs have gone away, so you see the current versions of PDFs on there, but going forward, you won't have the option for PDF.
Well, you can't get a PDF now.
Right.
But I can look at any standard.
Yes.
Through our company's subscription. Yes. Would there two different subscriptions?
Two different.
Okay.
Yeah, they would be two different. So some places are letting one go ahead and wrap up, and then new subscription would be through Link. And again, it's a good reason to try the 14 days and see, if it's something that you think you can use. But at any rate, it was kind of my analogy with the music industry. They're not going back to the way they were. They're going to continue to move forward with technology, and that's really what we're trying to respond to and give you a really good tool. The last thing I want to say about Link 2 is that we heard from the field right away that there needs to be access to Link without internet access. And we all know that's huge, because if you're in a building where you don't get reception, if you're there's some, buildings that won't allow you internet, if it's a government building and high security things. So that is in the works now. It's, they aren't just thinking about it, it's actually in the works, and it's coming up really soon that's gonna be available. Yeah, so it's gonna be really cool. Okay, other questions? All right, the last thing that I'm just going to mention here is NFPA Exchange. This is our communication platform, kind of similar to LinkedIn, where you can go, there's different forums There's a number of different forums. Electrical is one of those, and so it's another great resource to ask questions of your peers, of NFPA staff. I see them coming through every day. Sometimes they're really complicated, and so I know there's someone out there that's got the knowledge that can help answer some of their questions. So make sure that you jump on Exchange and take advantage of that as well. All right, here's my contact information. If there aren't any last questions, I always like to pause for a moment to make sure. All right, well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is a new group for me, so it's great to meet new people and learn more about your organization. So I am very grateful for the invitation to be here today, so thanks.
Thank you, Meredith. We're going to be setting up for the code panel. If you want to take a couple minutes, and we'll get set up for the code panel, and that'll wrap up today.
So you're gonna zoom, zoom, zoom.
That's what I'm going to try to figure out how to do. Steve Froman is online. He's switching to full. I'm switching to full computer now. I'm trying to see if I can bring up a PowerPoint, but what's happening is, see that red? Yeah, it's what's happening is my microprocessor is trying to give power to the PowerPoint, but then it doesn't give processing time. So what it does is it delays the video stream because it's every time I hit red or yellow, I'm encoding overloaded. So it goes in and out. My quality goes to good. And then sometimes it'll go to 4. And, you know, if somebody's watching a live stream, you want good video and audio. Period.
Where is it live right now?
YouTube.
That's
Really? Just go to YouTube.com/C/Thomas Dimitrovich. YouTube.com. C/Thomas Dimitrovich. And now it's a little bit delayed because he's standing over there. So, yeah.
Smile, you're on candid camera.
Smile. You're on candid camera.
That used to be my favorite show.
Yeah, we're trying, and you guys are live right now, so yep.
Yeah, just don't stick.
Mr. Froman in the house. See, now it's not receiving enough because my PowerPoint's still trying to come up. No, I don't know.
There's some first time I told them
Okay, see now I closed my PowerPoint, and now I'm back to a good stream. I got no reds over here. I just can't open anything else up because the processor.
Now, what PowerPoint were you trying to open, the one that has the questions?
I was going to see if I could call it up, and then the PowerPoint stream would be beautiful, and I could just show the panel and put them down below, put the big PowerPoint. That would be very cool.
Yeah.
But if I had the PowerPoint, I could do it. But I can't because my processor is just on hold.
So, what happens if the PowerPoint is already open before you connect and do anything?
That don't matter. They don't matter. Because the video card is going to try to be doing a little bit of both. And Yeah, it's starting soon, so, and Steve Fromming is like, I got no sound, I got no sound. We'll see what happens. But, so, I don't know, I don't know if I think, where's the western section going to be? Is it near here? The western section?
What do you mean by near? It's in this state, yes.
I know, but I mean, is it near right this, from
No.
this? No.
Probably another hour and a half.
Another hour and a half. I was gonna say, if I drive, I could bring my hunk of burn love computer. But if it's, I probably could drive. And then just,
I mean, if you would have came up the other direction, from there to your house probably won't be that much different. Maybe an hour.
maybe that's what I'll do. I'll just drive that computer up, and then then I'll have as much processing power as I'll have more than what I need. I could use the A10 if we were to bring other cameras in.
I could bring an iMac. I don't know if that's enough for you though.
Yeah, nah, if I'm gonna drive up, I'll just bring my computer.
When you know your machine, it makes a difference.
Yeah. Yep.
So the question becomes, you're going to patch audio into this, what's it worth?
Okay, so right now, because of the audio system is just in the air, I'm picking up the audio through this camera. Okay? If I was going to use the A10, it pulls it into this little jack here.
Okay.
But if, like, these are my camera inputs, right? To do it right, the camera should have an input for audio, so that you bring the video and
simultaneously.
Yes. Yes. Otherwise, I need to do the delay.
Yeah, synchronization.
Yeah. So and it depends on like. Oh. So.
I can do that.
Oh, we got 4 people watching online right now.
Nice.
Huh? Hey, what's going on? Oh, we're at the Michigan Chapter meeting. Just we're getting ready to do a code panel. I ate bad food last night, and I was heaving all night, so my throat is like raw. Oh, I feel good. I feel good because I got rid of everything. So.
Quicker you find the sheet, the quicker we can get this thing started.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We're gonna get started. So I'll call you. Can I call you after?
Okay, you ready? Okay, let's get the show on the road. Okay, my name's Don LeGrand, and I'll make the same plea I usually do. If you guys run across code questions or problems in the field someplace that you'd like to get an answer on, please feel free to email them to me. I will try to get them in a rotation and get them before the code panel. Okay. Code panel today, most of you know, but I'm going to introduce them anyway. First one, Tom Lichtenstein, raise your hand. Senior Regulatory Engineer with UL, you're still on code panel 7, aren't you? Okay. Dan Rebecki, building official, electrical inspector, city of Holland Township. I corrected myself. Member of the Grand Rapids Electrical Licensing Board. Okay, Joe Andrews. Field representative for CO2 Institute, and I think you're still on code panel 5, aren't you? Okay. Tim McClintock. He's the Nemo Midwestern field rep, right? Yes, sir. Oh, careful with the sir thing. Let's see, you've been at this about 30 years, right? Huh? Over a year and a half, huh? Huh? Well, yeah, but you've been in the industry for over 30 years. Yeah. Okay. Phil Clark. That was a lousy wave. Okay. Phil's again been in the electrical industry for 30 years. He's a past president of the chapter, retired inspector for the city of Detroit, and I think you're still on code panel 12, right? All right. Scott Weaver. Okay, you work for the city of East Lansing. You're the building official and electrical inspector. Okay. All right. Chairman of the Electrical Administrative Board for the state of Michigan, correct? Okay, and for those of you who don't already know, he's a past president of the chapter. Okay. So we ready to get started? Okay, first question goes to Tom. You there?
All right, thanks.
Okay, is it required that reconditioned equipment now be listed or only marked?
And the answer is, in the 2020 NEC, each code-making panel was charged to review the equipment in their respective articles and determine if the equipment under their purview could be reconditioned. In some articles, they identified equipment that could not be reconditioned, such as multi-case circuit breakers. And in other sections of the code, they required reconditioned equipment to be listed as reconditioned or field evaluated, such as switchboards and switchgear, and section 408.8. The requirements in the NEC, section 110.21A2 reconditioned equipment shall be marked with the name, trademark, or other descriptive marking by which the organization responsible for reconditioning the electrical equipment can be identified, along with the date of the recondition. Reconditioned equipment shall be identified as reconditioned, and the original listing mark shall be removed, so it doesn't, nobody sees the original listing mark and thinks, oh, it's good to go. Approval of the reconditioned equipment shall not be based solely on the equipment's original listing. So in the 2017 code, they did not require you to remove that label, the original listing mark in the 2020 code too. So the only way to verify a piece of equipment has been listed as reconditioned is if the UL listing or certification mark identifies it as listed, rebuilt, reconditioned, remanufactured. For more information on reconditioned equipment, go to, copy this down, ul.com/inspection resources, and then click on reconditioned equipment. I also have UL Code Authority Electrical Connections newsletter out there on reconditioned equipment out on the table there, so feel free to take it.
Okay, any questions? By the way, if you do have a question someplace along the way, or you want to jump into the discussion, I would ask you to step up to one of the microphones so that we can all hear what's going on. All right, question number 2. Okay, for Dan. Is it permissible to install LFNC underground for a feeder raceway from one structure to another, such as a house to a detached garage?
Looking in the code under 356, which is the liquid flexible non-metallic conduit, use is permitted. 10.10.4 says if it's listed and marked for direct burial, you can use that specific raceway for that. And also with the, you look through a few of the other ones down there, the use is permitted. It can be longer than 6 foot is allowed if need be. So as long as it's secured and supported properly. So the answer to that would be yes, it's allowed.
Questions? Wow, okay.
But doesn't it say that it can't be subject to physical damage, like when it's coming out of the ground onto the wall?
It does require protection from physical damage, but you can do that. It's all got to be done properly. But yes, it could be.
Answer your question? Yes. Okay. All right, question number 3. Joe? Is it permissible to hang a 10-foot stack of rigid conduit to a 4 square box that an exit sign is attached to without supporting the box at the exit sign?
Okay. The answer is probably not, but it depends on what you've done. It's probably not a compliant installation, and where you find this is 314.23, and it describes the minimum support for boxes, enclosures, etc. And specifically, I go to 314.23 paren F, and it talks about raceway supported enclosures with devices, luminaires, or lamp holders. So I'm guessing that this exit sign is a lighted exit sign, otherwise we shouldn't be talking about electrical. And if such, it is a luminaire. So the basic rule is that an enclosure, if you're going to support it from conduit, must have a minimum of 2 conduit entries threaded into the enclosure or into threaded hubs. I'm not picturing that in this installation in any way, shape, or form. It also must be secured, the raceway would have to be secured within 18 inches of the enclosure. There is an exception, number 2. It gives a little bit of relief from this, but there's a lot of conditions that I don't believe would be met here, primarily that this conduit must be secured within 36 inches of the enclosure. But with a bunch of conditions being met, you would have to take a look at it. An exception 2 could apply, but you really need to have threaded hubs, threaded enclosures going into that box. So, but my answer is probably not. Without a little more information, I can't say 100%.
All right, questions, comments? Okay, Tim? An electrical contractor installed 6 feeders without equipment grounds in PVC 20 feet from the 20 feet to the service from a pole box in a lower level of a building. He wants to resolve this issue by installing 1 equipment ground outside the raceways from the service to the pole box. Is this code compliant?
No, it's not. And a couple of code sections to look at here, 300.3b, which is conductors of the same circuit, states that all conductors of the same circuit, and where used, the grounded conductor and all equipment grounding conductors and bonding conductors shall be contained within the same raceway, auxiliary gutter, cable tray, etc., etc. 2 other sections to look at would be 250.120A and also 250.102E2, which states bonding jumpers are allowed so that you can install that conductor on the outside. However, 250.102E2 limits that to a length of 6 feet. So the installation would be non-compliant.
I'd just like to add to that, anybody that installs 6 feeders and PVC power conductors without a ground isn't an electrical contractor.
Say that.
For very long,
Okay.
anyway.
Was that?
For very long.
Okay, question number 5. Bill, I have a 4160 volt feeder supplying 4160 volt 480 volt oil field transformer that is being installed inside a building to supply a single fire pump. Is the transformer permitted to be installed in the same room as the fire pump? And what are the requirements for the room?
Okay, there's several parts to this answer.
Is your mic on?
My voice is on. A little closer. Okay, first of all, 450.26, which is the controlling article about oil insulated transformers installed indoors, shall be installed in a vault constructed as specified in Part 3 of this article. Part 3 of Article 450 describes in detail what's required of a vault, including 3-hour rating, 4 inches of concrete, specific rules on sills, doors, vents, etc., etc. Now, this is specific to oil fill. There are other fluids that are used in transformers where these rules would not necessarily apply. And there are 2 big exceptions. One is that where the oil field transformer is protected with an automatic sprinkler, water spray, CO2, or halon, construction of 1-hour rating shall be permitted for that vault, which is a giant deal. The other exception is where the total capacity of the transformer is not over 112 kVA. The vault specified can be constructed of reinforced concrete that is not less than 4 inches thick. So the answer up to this point is that you have to have a separation of the transformer. The transformer has to be in a specifically defined location and protected in a specifically defined way, no matter what the size of it is. As to the fire pump, and I'm sorry, I forgot. There is nothing that I could find in Article 450 that prohibits other equipment being installed in that vault. Now, as to the fire pump, there. Article 695 does not require a separate room for the installation of the pump. Specifies a suitable space, and NFPA 20 also goes along with that same idea, a suitable space, meaning that it's free from hazards that could impair the operation of the pump. So neither the NEC or or NFPA 20 mandates a specific discrete room for the fire pump, only that the controller has to be within sight of the equipment it drives. So the answer then for me is that if you have an oil-filled transformer, there are a couple of different ways that you can achieve code compliance without the monster idea of a vault as required generally by 450.26, and I could not see anything in the code that prohibits having a fire pump in that vault room, however it's constructed. So the answer is yes.
Questions, comments? Right. Scott? Question number 6. Is a servicing disconnect required on the side of a furnace in a house, even if it is in the same room as the electrical panel?
That's a good question. So looking in the MRC table E4101.5, 2015 MRC, it really doesn't give you direction that you have to or you can't. 2017 NEC Article 422.31 also doesn't really say that you can't do that. But what the sticker is if you look at the Michigan Mechanical Code, Article 301.10.1, it does require an electrical disconnect on or immediately adjacent to the equipment. When you look again back to the MRC and the NEC, it talks about within sight. So my suggestion is if you're an inspector, you should get with your team and make sure that you folks are on the same page, mechanical and electrical. If you're a contractor, probably at the rough stage, I would be asking that question and planning for the final.
Is that mechanical code for commercial?
You have a question out there?
The mechanical code was that for commercial or residential?
Using microphone?
Yeah, I'm not quite hearing you, sir.
Microphone. Thank you.
The mechanical code, was that in commercial for the having to have a disconnect within 6 feet, or was that for residential also?
When you get to a more stringent code, that's the one that applies. So that's why I say get on board with if you're an inspector with your mechanical team, and if you're a contractor, search that out at the rough so that when you get to the final, you're in the right spot.
The mechanical code requires that the mechanical contractor assure that there's a disconnect on or immediately adjacent to, which is a 6-foot rule or within sight. It says on or immediately adjacent to both codes.
Thank you. Anything else on that one? All right. Question number 7, Tom. My local inspector says I can't use SCR cable from a combination meter socket disconnect to a sub-panel.
So I'm going to assume that a combination meter socket disconnect would be a service disconnect means, and that the SCR cable is serving as a feeder. So section 338.10b covers the installation of SCR cable as feeders in branch circuits, and 338.10b4a covers the requirements for interior installations of SCR cable for feeder. This section requires that SCR cable used as interior wiring comply with Part 2 of Article 334, excluding Section 334.80. So as long as it's installed in accordance with Article 338 and the applicable parts of Article 334, you should be good to go.
Okay. Questions? Okay, Dan, question number 8. Does a walkway that overlooks a family room It is 25 feet long and requires a receptacle. It is open on both sides.
Coming from the affordable housing community of the Lake Shore, we usually don't have anything like this. No, again, we got some definitions here. There's no such thing as walkway. You can't find that in the building code. You can't find that anywhere. The reference, I know what they're talking about. It's the hallway. It's an open-sided hallway, basically, that goes between two sides of the building. So if it's a hallway, you have to go back to the code and look, and 21052H in the NEC and 3904.10 in the MRC tells you that you're required to have a receptacle for every hallway that's over 10 feet in length. Now, it doesn't say where that has to be on that hallway, so you could put it at where that walkway or the railings of that walkway would attach to the sides of a wall that has a capacity to put an outlet at the end of it, and that meets the requirement for having your one receptacle for that 25-foot long open-sided hallway. So I would, in my jurisdiction, I would look at that and say, yes, you would need to have a receptacle at one end or the other of that open-sided hallway.
Questions, comments? Wow.
That was a practical.
Okay, question number 9. Joe, what are the requirements for identifying the raceways and cables used for emergency wiring?
So for this one, I referenced 700.10a. 700, of course, is emergency systems, and 10a talks about identification. And it reads, emergency circuits shall be permanently marked so they will be readily identified as a component of an emergency circuit or system by the following methods. I'm going to stop right there, because I've never read this really closely until I got to this question. In my opinion, I think it should say by one of the following methods, because if you read number 1 and number 2, it kind of implies that you can do one or the other. But it doesn't say that in the charging sentence. So paren 1 says, all boxes and enclosures, including transfer switches, generators, and power panels for emergency circuits, shall be permanently marked as a component of an emergency circuit or system. And then number 2 says, where boxes or enclosures are not encountered, exposed cable or raceway systems shall be permanently marked to be identified as a component of an emergency circuit or system at intervals not to exceed 25 feet, 7.6 meters. It kind of sounds like if I have a box or an enclosure, 25 feet or less between them, that I don't have to identify the raceways or cables. But it's a little bit fuzzy. I will say that that's where it ends. It doesn't give us a requirement for color code. It doesn't tell us how this identification is to be accomplished other than it be permanent. So what is permanent? You put a label on it every 25 feet. You can find some of that in hazardous locations where they talk about that. Do we color code it? Do I use a magic marker, a crayon? I don't know if that's going to be permanent. So it doesn't say. It doesn't tell us what color. And I looked in the Michigan State Electrical Code. I couldn't find anything in Article 700 to identify that. And I think other jurisdictions around the country may have some requirements. The state of Washington, where I'm from, requires it to be orange, identified with orange. I will mention that you can get cables that are identified by stripes on the outside. You can also buy color-coded steel raceways. You can lay it down and paint it, but if you do, be careful about the ends because that's your running continuity. So there's my answer. It's every 25 feet, you need to be able to identify a cable or a raceway that it's an emergency circuit.
We're good with that? Okay. Question number 10. Tim, a church undergoes a service change. The previous gear was rated at 800 amps and was replaced with the same size gear. And the personnel doors to the area do not comply with Article 11026, C3. Should the doors be updated to panic hardware and egress door swing?
So if we look at the requirement, it's found in 11026C3. It requires where you have equipment rated 800 amps or more that contains overcurrent devices, switching devices, or control devices, and it is installed such that there is a personnel door that's intended for entrance to and egress from the working space, and it's within 25 feet from the nearest edge of that working space. Then the requirement specifies the door has to swing in the direction of egress and also be equipped with listed panic hardware. Now, while ultimately it could be argued that this is not a retroactive requirement, it's important to recognize why we have this requirement in the first place. In the event that you have an arc flash or an arc blast incident, having the door swing in the direction of egress and equipped with that panic hardware will aid in getting the worker to safety. Ultimately, I would suggest consulting with the local AHJ because really it becomes their call, but updating the door hardware would be an important step in electrical safety.
Okay. Number 11. Bill, if I have a switchboard / panel board or an MCC and a label on the front says 480 volt 3-phase 4-wire, am I required to install a feeder with a grounded conductor to the switchboard, panel board, or MCC if I will not have any line or neutral loads supplied by the equipment?
Okay.
Now you can say that.
It seems to me that a couple of terms that are really sloppily used in our industry are service ends, conductors, and feeders. So I approach this question both ways. If the switchboard, panel board, MCC is installed as service equipment, the answer is yes, there is a requirement for a grounded conductor to be installed, and that comes from Article 250-184. And it reads, systems with a grounded conductor at the service point. It goes on to say where an AC system is grounded at any point and is provided with a grounded conductor at the service point, a grounded conductor shall be installed and routed with the ungrounded conductors to each service disconnecting means and shall be connected to each disconnecting means grounded conductor or terminal or bus. Main binding jumper shall connect the grounded conductors to each service disconnecting means enclosure. The conductor shall be sized in accordance with 250-186. Size of the solidly grounded circuit conductor shall be the larger of that determined by 250-184 or 250-186. The exception there is when you have more than one service disconnecting means in a single enclosure, you only have to hit it one time. Now, on the other hand, if the switchboard, panel board, or MCC is installed on the load side of the service disconnect, meaning a feeder supplies the energy there, there's no requirement for no code requirement specific for the installation of a grounded conductor if there are no line to neutral loads. There may be a listing requirement based on the manufacturer's listing that that conductor be installed, but it's not a general code requirement.
All right, Scott. Can a receptacle behind a TV below 5.5 feet count for wall space above a work area counter, or is it considered non-accessible?
Well, I took a little look at that for a while, and I think that you can count that as meeting the requirement of 21052. 21052 does give us all our spacing requirements. It talks about the floor receptacle within 18 inches, all those kind of things, but it does not call the TV out as a item that would not allow that as accounting for your wall space.
Okay, questions? You're all good with that one, right? All right, question number 13. Tom, I was asked to bring power to a control box for a certain piece of equipment. The inspector told me it was not listed. I do see a listing mark on all the parts, including the enclosure, and that they have the enclosure that they are in, and the UL sticker reads industrial panel enclosure. What's up with this?
So it appears the assembly is not listed as an industrial control panel. It's only a listed industrial control panel enclosure. So industrial control panels and enclosures are listed under the product category industrial control panels. NITW is the UL category code, and you can find that on UL Product IQ, UL's an online database, at ul.com/PIQ and enter NITW in the search field. You'll get the guide information. The guide information for NITW states an enclosed industrial control panel is probably what the AHJ was looking for. So an enclosed industrial control panel is comprised of the enclosure, all components located within the enclosure, and all components mounted to the walls of the enclosure. So that would be the entire assembly. An open industrial control panel is comprised of a mounting subpanel and all components mounted to the subpanel, and is intended for installation into an enclosure in the field. Category also covers industrial control panel enclosures, which is what it appears we have here. Industrial control panel enclosures are intended to house open type industrial control panels or individual items of industrial control equipment installed in the field. Under the UL mark section, in the guide information, it states the enclosed industrial control panel listing mark covers both the enclosure and the provided panel. Open panels employ the open industrial control panel listing mark, and the industrial control panel enclosure listing mark covers only the enclosure. The compatibility of the enclosure and the installed equipment and associated wiring has not been investigated, unless an enclosed industrial control panel listing mark is also present.
Questions, comments? You guys are good. Okay, Dan. When I'm wiring a house that has been moved from one address to another address, is it required to install tamper-resistant receptacles and install ground fault protection?
This is one of those inadequate questions, because it says when I am wiring, what does that mean, you're wiring the house? If that means that you're running all new circuits in there when the house gets to its new location, you're running all new circuits, replacing receptacles and luminaires, then yes, you need to bring that up to the current code. Yeah, this answer with wiring, that would be my assumption is what you're doing, but it also could be that they are talking about, I'm going to put a new service on this thing and connect new circuits to what was left down below, and they're not doing anything more than that. So what do you do in that situation? So my answer to if you're running the new installation of circuits and you're replacing receptacles, you're required to put in the tamper resistant and ground fault protection where required by code. In this sense, you would have to use the MRC, because that is what falls under a one-family dwelling, and there is an appendix J of that MRC that applies to existing installations, which is what that would be. And your replacement of those, it falls under that you must meet the code for new replacement, which would put you into E4002.16 in the MRC, that When you replace a receptacle, if it's supposed to be tamper resistant, you gotta put tamper resistant in. If it's supposed to be ground fault, you gotta put ground fault in. But the other issue falls if you're not doing that, and it was an existing installation that was code compliant at the time, can you leave it as it was? That is where you would have to get involved with your building official and discuss that ramification. I'm taking it that when they're wiring the house, they're rewiring the whole house. So you would have to meet the requirements of the new code for the replacement of those receptacles.
That's all that I don't care.
You guys are all awake like that, right? Shake your head, raise your hands up, let me know you're still there, okay. Just had to check.
I think maybe we have no residential contractors out here today, so we're gonna.
Can we rewire the house and use the old plugs?
That involves, were they non-grounded at the time? How would you do?
Okay, Joe. 110.16B requires a label on 1200 amp or more service equipment. Where do I get the clearing time information if the utility doesn't have it?
Okay, well, generally the utility isn't going to have it. It's not a utility function. And how many of you were in here this morning to hear Tom Dimitrovich talk about arc flash and all the other good stuff? And part of that was about clearing time. Remember we talked about, we asked the question, what are the two components of how much arc flash energy, and one is the available fault current, the other is the amount of time that it's there. What we're looking for here is the service overcurrent protection, whether it's a breaker, molded case, adjustable, or a fuse. You can find that clearing time from the manufacturer. It's how long it takes for that device to operate, to open a circuit or open a feeder, and remove the energy from a fault someplace. So you need to take a look at, you can go online nowadays and you can find every manufacturer's device, and you can take a look at the curves, you can take a look at their information, and you can find the clearing time. And that's important, because if you're going to work on this energized under the very limited allowances under OSHA, and I think Michigan OSHA, M-I-O-S-H-A, you need to make sure that you are properly protected, that you've got proper protection, PPE on. And the only way to do that is to figure the amount of available fault current and the amount of time that you're going to be exposed to that before the device operates. So you go to the manufacturer. If you're having trouble reading the trip curves or can't find the information, make a phone call. This is really, really critical information, and I guarantee you, every manufacturer will be happy to help you get this right. This is a very big safety issue. So I guess that's all I got. I just can't emphasize enough that you want to make sure that clearing time is accurate.
Except the manufacturer doesn't have the available fault current from the utility.
No, you don't need. No, you have to get that from the utility. This asks for the clearing time. You need to have the available.
But you can't determine the clearing time without the available fault current.
You're right. You need to have both, because the available fault current will, in many instances, change the clearing time. So you have to have that information. But it talked about where do I get the clearing time if the utility doesn't have it. So no argument. You're absolutely right. But that wasn't the question as I read it anyway.
I'm assuming they're asking the utility to give the available fault.
Well, it says the clearing time. So that's how I answer the question. Fault current isn't clearing time. Yeah, 1 times 24 requires available fault current to be marked.
And your label has to show clearing time. Right.
So you need
And Joe said that several times.
Okay. Yep. So let's be clear on that. Yes, the utility is probably going to give you available fault current. If you know the transformer impedance and the transformer size and the voltage, you can calculate that very quickly on your own anyway. So you get the fault current from the utility. You need the available fault current to go to the tables to figure the clearing time of the overcurrent protection. Thanks for the clarification, because that's an important piece.
I just think what he's saying is sometimes it's hard to get that from the utility.
Yeah.
I know they're struggling with it, but they're well aware of the requirement.
You can get the information online.
Can you?
Yeah, most utilities that I've ever dealt with will have published statistics on tables on all of the transformers that they use. And it's based on the impedance and the voltage of the transformer and things like that, and the size of the transformer. And if you know those three parameters, put in a plug for Eaton, or what is it, FC2?
FC squared.
FC squared.
Yep.
All you need to know is wire size, length, transformer size, transformer impedance, and voltage, and it will give you available fault current, even if the utility is not cooperative. I'll send you the bill.
Thanks, John. I'm sure I'll pay dearly.
Any other questions on this one? All right, Tim, why are the bathroom, garage, and outside excluded from the AFC protection requirement?
Well, the short answer to that is because the industry hasn't completed that evolution yet. And really, it goes back to the Consumer Product Safety Commission back in the early 90s, based on alarming statistics for electrically related fires, as reported by the U.S. Fire Administration. The call for advanced circuit protection came from the CPSC. Consequently, manufacturers in concert with UL developed what we know today as the AFCI. And just a brief history on that, of course, it was first introduced in the 1996 revision cycle, but Code Making Panel 2 rejected it at that time due to the fact that that technology was brand new and they wanted to give industry time to bring it into the system. And at that time, that proposal, that original proposal, was for whole house AFCI protection. While it didn't make it in the 96 edition, it was actually in the 1999 revision cycle. They came back to the table with basically the same proposal, again for whole house. And it was at that time Code Making Panel 2 took the position that they would take an incremental step to mandating AFCIs, and that's where we saw it first introduced for the bedroom receptacle outlets. And they didn't pick bedrooms because that's where all the fire statistics pointed to. They picked bedrooms because that was an easily identifiable room in the home and was a good starting place. So, we've seen over the last 20 years, that incremental expansion, and which brings us to where we're at today in the 2020 NEC. It has not been expanded beyond the 2017. But nonetheless, I think we will, well, I know we will get there. Don't know if it'll be in the 2023 revision cycle, but nonetheless, it's not in bathrooms, garages, or outside, simply because we haven't reached that point in the process yet.
Okay, thank you. Bill, I was called to do a service change on an older apartment building. I have to move the panel board about 10 feet to get my working clearances. Am I required to install AFCI breakers in this new panel?
Well, yes, you are.
Next.
Thank you. It's important to remember that this is a multi-family dwelling we're concerned with, so that in Michigan, the national code applies and not the MRC. And the controlling rule is NEC 210.12. for arc fault circuit interrupter protection. And arc fault circuit interrupter protection shall be provided as required in 210.12 A, B, C, and D, not or D. The arc fault interrupter shall be installed in a readily accessible location. D, branch circuit extensions or modifications, dwelling units and dormitory units in any of the areas specified in 210.12 A or B, where branch circuit wiring is modified, replaced, extended, the branch circuit shall be protected by one of the following: a listed combination type AFCI located at the origin of the branch circuit, a listed outlet branch circuit type AFCI located at the first receptacle outlet of the existing circuit, and the exception reads that AFCI protection shall not be required where the extension of the existing conductors is not more than 1.8 meters, 6 feet, and does not include any additional outlets or devices. So if the contractor in question here has to move the panel in such a way that the length of the conductors is going to exceed 6 feet, AFCI protection is going to be required.
Questions? Going back to sleep, huh? Okay. Question number 18. Scott? 110.36B require luminaires installed in suspended ceilings to be attached to the ceiling members. Some jurisdictions require independent support wires instead. Are the wires allowed or required?
Yes, no.
Okay, next.
As stated, 41036B, when it talks about the suspended ceilings, it says the framing members of the suspended ceiling system used to support luminaires shall be securely fastened to each other and shall be securely attached to the building structure at appropriate intervals. Luminaires shall be securely fastened to the ceiling framing member by mechanical means such as bolts, screws, or rivets. List of clips identified for use of that type of ceiling frame members and luminaires shall also be permitted. So it really doesn't say anything about wires. So they are allowed, you can do it, but we should be separate from what the wires that are already there for the ceiling. And those wires there for the ceiling are for the ceiling. So if you're gonna do wires, have separate wires, but they are, there you go.
Isn't the ceiling listed to support the luminaire?
Excuse me?
The ceiling grid listed to support the luminaire, but not the fire column.
Correct. The ceiling is engineered designed so that it will support the luminaire, correct.
The luminaire doesn't need extra wires, just all those peripheral electrical equipment.
Say again?
So the luminaire does not need additional wires, only the wiring methods.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else on that one?
Yeah, the independence, the extra wires for the luminaires comes from the building code. If you're in certain seismic areas, you may have to put wires on the luminaires to hold them up. So you won't, that's usually not what you would find in Michigan. We don't meet the seismic requirement for those, but that is a requirement in some areas that you have separate supports for your luminaires. Sometimes it's
2 corners.
2 corners, sometimes it's the 4 corners, it all depends on where you're at. So, and I know there's some jurisdictions that the building departments are making them put them up because the fire department wanted them. But that's of course of a different color, so, but if Scott's right by the electrical code, they're not required.
Okay, good with that one? Okay, question number 19, Tom. Separate structures require grounding electrode. Since the conductor does not go to the grounded conductor, is it legal to simply install a lug in the panel and use the panel as a conductor to the ground bar?
Okay, so section 250.32A, excuse me, requires a grounding electrode system and grounding electrode conductor to be installed at buildings or structures supplied by a feeder or branch circuit. 250.30B1 covers grounding systems and requires an equipment grounding conductor as described in 250.118 to be run with the supply conductors and be connected to the building or structure disconnecting means and to the grounding electrode. The cabinet or cutout box is not listed in 250.118 as a type of equipment grounding conductor. So the grounding electrode conductor should terminate to the equipment grounding bus in the panel where the equipment grounding conductor is terminated.
You agree with that?
Okay. So no, you can't use the box as a conductor.
Huh.
Somebody carry the first name to the microphone.
Yeah, say that again, we didn't all hear that.
I just said, huh.
Okay, anything else on that one? Huh?
You've got a mic.
Yeah. Okay, question number 20.
Wait.
Before we move on.
Okay.
And I looked at that when I was looking at this too, but you're mixing up the equipment grounding conductor run with the feeder or branch circuit with the grounding electrode conductor. That has to terminate in the enclosure itself, and it has to terminate in the bus bar, I believe. I don't think we can use the enclosure to make that connection.
That's true. That's true.
You can do it with an equipment grounding conductor. You can use the enclosure, but this is not an equipment grounding conductor. This is a grounding electrode conductor. So I think your code reference of 250.32 for the grounding conductor run with the circuit conductors is not where we need to be.
So blurry. Yeah, it's just the camera. Yeah, but I can't take that.
No, 251.18 is equipment grounding conductors, not grounding electrode conductors.
Right.
Yeah, get somebody at the mic over here too. You know?
My question is if you ground that or bond that to the cabinet, and you're grounded to your grounding electrode system, are you using the cabinet as a fault path? Last time I knew, UL doesn't list the cabinets to carry the fault path. Exactly. Well, under those conditions, no, you can't bond that to the cabinet, because you're using the cabinet as a path, unless there's a cabinet out there that I'm unaware of that you can use that as a path.
So let me ask you another question though. Is the grounding electrode conductor part of your ground fault current path? It's not. I'll save you the answer. We don't consider that part of the ground fault current path. 250.4A5 states very clearly that the ground shall not be used as a ground fault current path. So we're not talking about fault current going through the enclosure in this instance. Christine.
Okay, if I have a commercial installation, I have a piece of EMT, and I go to a 4-square, and then I continue on with some more EMT, just power circuits. That 4-square is carrying any fault current that happens on those circuits. And we see that all day.
To the 4-square.
Exactly, we do that every day, all day.
Every single day.
Exactly. So I'm saying, insanely, the enclosures aren't listed. And Joe, didn't we do something in 250 about the enclosures being a fault return?
Where did that end up? 250.109, I think.
Somewhere in there.
And for the 2020, if you've got one in front of you, 250.109 is a new section, and it states that intervening boxes and closures, things like that, are adequate as a ground fault current path. I got a little heartburn with that general overriding statement, but we do recognize that. You also need to go back to 250.97 to make sure you comply if it's over 250 volts to ground, and make sure the knockouts are listed for grounding in that instance.
But then you also clarified that The grounding electrode conductor has little to nothing to do with fault currents. So connecting it to the equipment grounding conductor is not as important as connecting a grounding electrode conductor to the fault return path at the service, which we also call the grounded conductor or neutral conductor. That's critical. That's where that grounding electrode conductor starts. It may or may not go to a grounding electrode, but my garage does need a contact with earth, and it could be the panel itself that is doing that when I lug onto the panel.
This is gonna be a grounding class, so we're gonna get extra credit. Somebody else at the microphone.
So the way I understand the code, it breaks down the grounding system in three parts. It's equipment grounding, system grounding, and bonding. Okay, and I think the question addresses bonding the grounding electrode system or system grounding and using the panel board as a conductor for that part of the system, which has much higher fault current on it than the equipment grounding system after the overcurrent protection.
I'm not sure I understand where the ground fault current comes from on
It depends. So if the fault current's coming from the equipment, it's equipment grounding using the conduit system boxes and other fittings. But system grounding is trying to defer lightning strikes and incidental contact from the utility.
System grounding, as it's defined in the code, means that I have a normally current carrying conductor that is bonded to the earth and to the grounding system. I mean, I've got it's a Y connected system, or it's a midpoint grounded like a residential. System grounded means my system that I'm using to operate equipment is connected to earth.
I disagree and agree, because the equipment grounding is to facilitate the operation of the overcurrent device, and the system grounding is meant to dissipate and hopefully deter current from the electrical system feeding their electrical service.
We've got a couple of people on panel 5 here that see it there.
Kristen, any other comments or thoughts? Sounds like we're gonna get agreement on this one today. Okay. Dan.
Are we leaving? Are we leaving it alone or not? Leave it alone.
Set? Okay, Dan. Okay, do the switches in a screened-in porch need a weatherproof cover? The inspector seems to think so.
I go with the inspector, he's always right, right? An argument on that one? All right.
No, that one's not gonna fly.
Yeah, that won't fly? All right. First, we gotta look at what the definition of a damp location is, and the definition of a damp location, it's a location protected from weather, not subject to saturation with water or other liquids, but subject to moderate degrees of moisture. Okay, so now you have to look at, the inspector has to look at that and say, is this area meet that criteria, which for a screened-in porch, yes, they're gonna have some moderate saturation or some moderate degrees of moisture get into that screened-in porch. So I would say if that switch is located under that screened-in porch that would have some moderate degrees of moisture getting to it, the inspector is right that you would need to have those switches be installed, and they're in a damp location, so therefore they would have to have a cover necessary for damp location. So you're going to get back to the definition of what that damp location is. That's in E3501 in the MRC, and then the weatherproof cover by E4001.7 in the MRC, and R104.1, which is the authority having jurisdiction makes the call on these rules, and that's out of the MRC as well. So you can argue with the inspector that you don't agree with his interpretations, but if he makes that interpretation that it's a damp location, you're going to have a cover listed for damp location in that area.
do that?
Didn't say grounding.
Okay, Joe?
No, this is another grounding question, I'm not doing it.
I'm sorry. All right, I installed a main disconnect on the outside of a single-family dwelling. But the UFR is stuffed up in the basement near the sub-panel location. Where do I connect the grounding electrode conductor from that UFR? Kind of know what the question is they're asking.
Yeah, hopefully this is gonna go a little more straightforward. Assuming that the main disconnect is your service disconnect that's on the outside of the dwelling, and the UFR says it's stuffed up near the sub-panel location. The term sub-panel doesn't occur in the code, but it's on the load side of the service. So I go to first 250.24.A5, and among other things it says the grounding electrode conductor, and this applies whether it's a UFR, whether it's a water ground, whether it's rods, whether it's whatever, shall not be reconnected to the ground on the load side of the service disconnecting means except as otherwise permitted in this article. Also go to 250.66. Grounding electrode conductor must be unspliced or spliced using non-reversible means, cited for table 256. It needs to go to your service disconnecting means to tie into the grounded conductor if it's a grounded system, and to tie into all of your non-current carrying metal parts. Past the service, unless it's a separate building or separately derived system, we do not rebond the grounding electrode conductor nor the equipment grounding conductor to the grounded conductor in my system. I confused everybody enough that you want to ask any questions?
Any questions? Not everybody at once. Okay. In the construction of a swimming pool, a connection between building steel and the reinforcing rod in the pool casing is prohibited. Does it create a hazard if they're connected in the building steel and the reinforcing are common to each other?
So this one's kind of a grounding question too. So the two code panel 5 members can feel free to jump on me if I get the answer wrong. But I started out with section 250.52b, which is what's not permitted to be used as a grounding electrode conductor. And under 250.52b3, the structures and structural reinforcing steel described in 680.26, B1 and B2 are prohibited from being used as a grounding electrode conductor. So it's important to understand the key purpose behind the bonding as prescribed in 680.26 and that equal potential bonding grid. That grid is there to reduce voltage gradients between two conducting objects and not create a grounding electrode system. So extending that pole bonding back to the building would really make the pole a super target for any stray currents or ground fault current that may be introduced on the grounding electrode system, thus potentially introducing safety hazards to the occupants of the pool during events such as lightning-induced stray currents, or maybe, high voltage line dropping down on the secondary. But it would definitely serve as a great grounding electrode, just I don't think I want to be in the pool whenever that happens.
Questions, comments? Everybody agrees? Sure, I believe that, but okay. Okay, question number 23, Bill. Does a receptacle installed near the roof for snow melting and de-icing heat cables required to be GFCI protected?
The answer is yes, and that's per Article 426 for fixed outdoor electric de-icing and snow melting equipment. 426.28 reads that ground fault protection of equipment shall be provided, excuse me, for fixed outdoor electric de-icing and snow melting equipment. That's as far as it reads, so there's no exceptions there. It's important to remember that this is indirect personnel protection, so it's not required to be a Class A GFCI device. The GFCI protection here is to limit the possibility of fire from low-level arcing. How people are protected in this situation is by the voltage limitation that the code puts on the isolation transformer connected to the heating elements, which restricts, excuse me, restricts the output voltage to no greater than 30 volts. Yes, there is required to be GFCI protection there. It's a little bit different application than we're accustomed to.
Questions, comments? All right, Scott. Okay, Scott. Is an individual branch circuit required for cord-connected range hood? If not, then what circuits can serve this range hood?
Okay, well, I don't have to answer the second part of that question, so that's good. In the MRC, the 2015 E4101.3, a receptacle for a cord plug connected range hood shall be supplied by an individual branch circuit. Says it pretty simply. When you go to the NEC 422.16, it talks about the range hoods shall be permitted to be cord plug connected with a flexible cord, blah, 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 where all of the following conditions are met. And it gives you 5 conditions, and on the last one, number 5, the receptacle is supplied by an individual branch circuit. So I think that's the answer you're looking for.
Okay. I didn't see any crowd jump up there, so. Okay. Huh? Oh. All right. Number 25. Tom. I'm remodeling a building that an optometrist will be doing laser surgery for correcting vision, among other services that they provide, or that they offer. My question is, does the part of the building that will be part of the laser surgery need to meet the requirements of 517 of the NEC? It goes on to say, I do not see where the optometrist needs to meet the requirement.
So in the 2020 NEC, this was clarified a bit. If the optometrist office was doing exclusively optometrist work, easy for me to say, without laser surgery, I would say would fall under 517.10B3, that would indicate part 2 of our 517 would not apply. However, since they're doing laser surgery that meets the definition of an invasive procedure in a patient care space, and would then comply with 517.10A and would apply to that patient care space where they're doing laser surgery.
You guys are so quiet. Huh?
They got the koozies, but nothing to fill the koozies. So they're waiting for the stuff to fill the koozies, and the more we talk, they gotta wait longer to get their
that's your story?
Ice cold beverage.
You're right.
I didn't even see a lot of hands go
We didn't
up.
even say yes, you just nodded, a couple nods.
You guys are still awake, right?
It's the first meeting back, everybody's getting into it slowly.
Yeah, but there should be some enthusiasm there. You get to figure out who the guy is you've been sitting, the guy or gal you've been sitting next to for however long. You actually see their face. Okay. 26. Can the receptacle on the front porch that has 3 steps to a single-family dwelling also be the receptacle on the front on the front of the house?
Yes.
Next.
Yeah. The code requires that not less than 1 receptacle outlet that is readily accessible from grade level and not located more than 6.5 feet above grade shall be installed front and back of each dwelling unit with direct access to grade. That change, that's a wording change. It used to be, it had to be accessible at grade level. Now it's accessible from grade level. And as long as that receptacle on that porch that is only 3 steps up is less than 6.5 feet high from that grade, it'll meet that requirement. E3901.7 or 21052E1.
That was.
They just want to know if it was plugged into his jacuzzi. All right. Okay, 27, go. I'm using the tap rules allowed in the NEC Article 240.21 V5. I'm tapping off the load side of a 400 amp service disconnect with number 2 copper cables that feed a 100 amp main circuit breaker. When sizing the equipment grounding conductor, do I size it for the 400 amp breaker or do I size it for the 100 amp breaker?
And this is a good question, because you've got two different devices, and you need to know which one we need to use. So where I go with this, 251.22, and specifically the table to 251.22, if you read the heading on the left-hand side of the column, it says rating of the maximum or rating of the overcurrent protective device ahead of the conductor. So this is going to be an interactive question. I've got a 400 amp overcurrent device and I've got a 100 amp overcurrent device. Which device is ahead of my conductor? 400. I heard somebody say it. If I had a candy bar, I'd throw it your way. So yeah, that's the answer. Even though it's a smaller conductor, we're tapping it off of a larger feeder or larger conductor that probably has higher fault currents, and we need to protect it in accordance with that higher overcurrent device to make sure that we've got enough meat on that, enough mass to clear a fault and trip the overcurrent device in the instantaneous range. So we base it on the size of the overcurrent device ahead of it. Now I took this another step, because if you read 251.22a, it also states that the equipment grounding conductor does not need to be larger than the circuit conductors. So there might be a caveat in there where you wouldn't have to size it full size off the table if the tap conductors were smaller than that. But in this case, the equipment grounding conductor ends up being the same size as the tapped conductors anyway, so you're not going to be worried about applying that particular provision. And now Dave's getting up here. Now I'm in trouble.
Testing, there it is. When you reference the circuit, they don't have to be any size any larger than the circuit conductors. Again, these aren't circuit conductors, so maybe that's something that might need to be looked at.
Yeah, that's a good thought. And even as I was saying, I was thinking, well, which of the circuit conductors? The large conductor you're tapping off of, or the smaller tap conductor?
The 400 here's 100, the volts here, it's gonna be coming on the smaller conductors.
You want the mic?
That may be a good subject for a little code change clarification for 2026. I'll be retired by then, so.
What I was saying is picture the 400 amp here and picture the 100 amp down here, and a fall in between the two the conductors that are carrying that fault are the 100 amp tapped conductors, right? So it wouldn't, the 400 conductors feeding the 400 aren't my circuit conductors in that case. In which case, then I would have larger conductors tripping that 400. Once I change to the smaller ones, those are my circuit conductors for my fault, right?
Yeah, but those, they could be tapped, I mean, it could be a number 8 tapped off of a 4 odd, so you still got a lot of fault current there. It's a great question, and I think maybe it needs some clarification.
Okay, any other questions on that one?
Just a comment. In parallel installations, a common mistake is to not have an equipment grounding conductor large enough in each raceway. And again, it's important to remember that that conductor has to be sized for by the overcurrent device, not by the size of the conductors in each raceway.
That's an excellent point. We've kicked that around a lot in panel 5. So the mistake people make is, well, if I go to 250-122A, they don't have to be larger than the circuit conductors. So I've got a certain size conductor in each raceway or cable. That's not the circuit conductors. The circuit conductors is the total circular mill sum of all of the parallel conductors in each phase. So it very well might be larger than the conductors in each raceway or cable, total them all together, and it won't be. Questions or comments? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I do think the intent, I was on code panel 5 when this wording went in. The intent was, there was no sense having a equipment grounding conductor to clear a fault larger than the conductor supplying the fault, which in this case would be the number 2, because this is an extension to that piece of equipment, that's the 100 amp. So in other words, the fault would be going through the number 2, off to the ground, returning on a number 2 equipment ground.
Yep.
Good job.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
If the fault is between the two, we're not gonna see current going through the 100 amp breaker.
No.
No, not at all.
We gotta clear the 400 amp breaker.
Yeah.
Tap conductors, we protect from short circuit, ground fault with the larger upstream, overload with the lower downstream.
Yeah,
So we gotta use the 400 amp.
Yeah, the 100 amp won't see it, and that's also why the tap rules have a 10-foot tap rule where you can go down to 10% of this tap of the size of the conductor you're tapping from, or the overcurrent device ahead of it, and the 25-foot tap rule where you can only go to 1/3 the rating of the overcurrent device ahead of it, because you're introducing a tremendous amount of impedance from that larger conductor that you're tapping off of. So you want to make sure that you don't reduce your impedance to the point where that larger overcurrent device won't trip.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Did you happen to notice that was a grounding question again? That seemed to get their attention.
Well, I like the way Chris was holding the mic earlier. She kind of looked like a rock star.
You can use your cane.
Yeah, put a hook around that, grab it over.
Okay. Tim, question 28. How often does the ground fault protection for equipment need to be tested? 23095C states that it is installed, and states when it is installed, a performance test is required, but after that, it's not clear when it needs to be tested again, or after that.
So performance testing of the ground fault protection system is vital for the newly installed electrical equipment to ensure proper system operation. That test process involves primary current injection, which will test the system, including the electronics of the relay or trip unit, and ensure the current transformer installation and wiring are correct. As far as any requirements in the NEC for additional maintenance testing, you know, similar to what we see with a GFCI, there is nothing currently in the NEC. However, NFPA 70B, which is the recommended practice for electrical equipment maintenance, may introduce requirements in the future. There's nothing in that recommended practice today. However, in discussions with Mr. Dimitrovich, who is also a member of that technical committee, they're looking at potentially adding some additional testing requirements under that document.
Okay, that work for everybody? All right, question number 29. Bill? Yeah, you're on. A 200 amp circuit is increased from 3/0 copper to 500 kC mill copper to compensate for voltage drops. What size copper equivalent grounding conductor would be required for this circuit? See, now you get your grounding questions.
We're back to 25122 again. In this case, it's 25122B, increased in size. So where ungrounded conductors are increased in size from the minimum size that has sufficient ampacity for the intended installation, wire type equipment grounding conductors, where they're installed, that's a hint, you can get away from all this, just use a metal conduit. Where they shall be increased in size proportionally according to the circular mill area of the ungrounded conductors. So, according to the table, 25122, the proper size copper equipment grounding conductor for a 200 amp circuit is number 6 copper. If we increase the size of the ungrounded conductors from 3/0 to 500 kC mill, that's about an increase of 3 times. 3/0 copper has a circular mill of 167,800, where 500 kC mill, of course, has 500,000. To keep the right proportion, we need a conductor with about 3 times the area of the number 6 copper, which is 26.4 centimeters. We need a conductor about 3 times that figure. Number 1 copper is 78 kC mill, 78 centimeters, so that should do it. So if we went up to number 1 copper as the equipment grounding conductor, that should meet the requirement.
Okay. Questions? Comments? Okay. Scott, is it required to have a bonding bushing on a 208 volt disconnect when the reducing washer is used and all of the rings are not removed?
Yep, so I'll turn the mic on first. So a while ago, Tom Lichtenstein told us about this product IQ thing that UL offers, and if you don't have that, you should probably check into it. That's where I found my guidance here, was under the UL product IQ category QCRV. And I hate to read this all to you, but this is what it tells us. It tells us that metal reducing washers are considered suitable for grounding for use in circuits over and under 250 volt, were installed in accordance with the ANSI/NFPA 70 National Electrical Codes for raceways containing other than service conductors. Reducing washers are intended for use with metal enclosures having a minimum thickness of 0.053 inches. Reducing washers may be installed in enclosures provided with concentric or eccentric knockouts only after all of the concentric and eccentric knockouts that have been certified for buying purposes. Oops, I think I skipped a line there. Have been removed, there we go. Only after all the rings have been removed. However, those enclosures containing concentric and eccentric knockouts that have been certified for bonding purposes may be used with reducing washers without all the knockouts being removed.
Okay. Good with that one? Okay, Tom, Article 404.2C, where a grounded conductor is needed in a switch box. Do I need a grounded conductor for each circuit in the box? If not, will the control device still work?
So I would say you only need a grounded conductor for the controlled lighting circuit that will be controlled by the control device, e.g. a motion sensor. The first sentence in 404.2c specifically states grounded conductor for the controlled light circuit. So in the event of another circuit is running to or through the switch box, unless the other circuit is controlling lighting in that space, I say it's not required to have an additional grounded conductor just because it's run through or to that box. Now, in the 17 code where there are more than one switch location controlling the lighting for that area, you only need to put the grounded conductor in one location. Regarding the second question and whether an AFCI will work, it does, an AFCI does require a grounded conductor or neutral for an AFCI device or circuit breaker to work. However, 404.2c is not the section that requires a grounded conductor supply to supply the AFCI device. 404.2c only relates to switches.
Tom, if I understood you right, you said if a light is controlled from another location, the other location doesn't require the neutral.
Right, so if there's only, let's see what the, let me read it verbatim here from my NFPA link that states in the 17, where multiple switch locations control the same lighting load such that the entire floor area or room or space is visible from the single or combined switch location, the grounded circuit conductor shall only be required in one location.
I ran into a situation recently. An acquaintance of mine had a house that was built within the last couple of years. And I didn't do the inspection on it, so I didn't see what was done there before. But anyway, he bought some switches through Amazon to control through his.
Oh, then they're good.
Yeah. And
that's ready for you.
They were Leviton switches, but he bought them through that.
Spelled wrong.
Whatever, I don't know if it's Amazon or whoever.
It's just getting worse.
So he bought a three-way, one that was suitable as a three-way, 200 controls outside lights. So I put it in, looked it up the way, but it wouldn't work. So I got reading the instructions. Well, it requires a compatible remote switch at the other location. So we had to order that. Took a week to come in. Well, that one also requires a neutral. Fortunately, whoever wired it in a way that there was a neutral at both locations, and it worked. But without that neutral, it wouldn't work. So it's something for people to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, and as with all products, 110.3b, right? You gotta look at those instructions. You can't just assume because you know what happens when you assume.
Well, he was lucky. Otherwise, he couldn't have done the control he wanted to do. Right. He could control it from his app and all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
Okay. Any other comments on that one? All right. Dan. Okay. In a home remodel, does an existing receptacle that is in the kitchen area need to be resupplied in order to connect to one of the small appliance branch circuits? The receptacle is not otherwise part of the remodel.
I'm seeing a theme through my questions. I became the home remodel expert here. Again, this is one that falls to this receptacle is not part of the scope of the work on your permit or part of the remodel. So the answer to B would be no, it's not required to do anything to that receptacle. You were not hired to do that, or it's not part of the work that's included in the scope of your permit. And that falls under, again, the all additions, alterations, and repair section of the MRC, which is the AJ 501. That's a lot of people don't know that exists in that book, but it is there, and also in 80.9C of the Michigan Electrical Code about additions, alterations, and repairs. It says, additions, alterations, and repairs to any building, structure, or premise shall conform to that of new installation without making the existing building comply with all the requirements of the code. So if you're not being, if that portion's not being affected, you cannot go and make them do anything to that unless they choose to. So my answer to that would be no, you don't have to do anything there.
Good with that one? Okay, Joe. The design professional told us he wanted to lock the main disconnect for a commercial building. We told him we couldn't do that because in case of an emergency, the disconnect could not be shut off. He is pretty sure he is all right. What do you say?
I'm going to agree with the design professional on this one. There's no prohibition about locking a overcurrent device, a main disconnect. Happens all the time, in fact. And remember, whether it's a fuse or a breaker, all of the protective functions that are automatic are going to work. I don't think there's any question that if you lock the fuse handle in the on position and you have a overload, ground fault, or short circuit, that fuse will open. Same will happen with a breaker. Holding the handle closed doesn't mean that it's not going to trip internally. If you're going to be doing maintenance, you've got a key, right? So then you can do a normal shutdown. So the question is, what happens in an emergency? Does anybody here think that if there's a fire, the fire service isn't going to be able to break that lock off, cut it off, happen in a half an instant? So, I don't have a code article for you because there's, you can't prove a negative. There's no requirement in the code for not locking it on. And in fact, when the 2020 comes out, and for 1 and 2 family dwellings, there's a requirement to have some kind of a building disconnect on the exterior of the building, you're probably going to see an awful lot of that. People are going to be afraid on Halloween somebody's going to shut their power off or something. You're going to see lockable disconnects being locked in the on position on a regular basis, I'm sure.
Okay, let's see. Question 34, Kim. Are the branch circuit conductors feeding an EV charger rated at 80 amps on the nameplate required to be full size, even though the installer/owner can internally select a lesser ampacity charging output based on the vehicle charging equipment or requirements?
And so here's another example of where timely adoption of the NEC can actually pay off. Too many times when we look at it updating the code, we're always looking at those requirements that may add cost. Well, in this instance, in the 2020 NEC actually can provide some relief. There was a change in 625.42 that now specifically addresses this, and it states that adjustable settings shall be permitted on fixed-in-place equipment only. If adjustments have an impact on the rating label, those changes shall be in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, and the adjusted rating shall appear with sufficient durability and withstand the environment involved. Then it goes on to say that electric vehicle supply equipment with restricted access to ampere adjusting means shall be permitted to have those ampere ratings that are equal to the adjusted current setting. Sizing the service and feeder to match the adjusting means shall be permitted. And then restricted access shall prevent the user from gaining access to the adjusted means, and then it gives you 3 conditions that have to be met with that. But nonetheless, the 2020 edition NEC would permit that utilizing the lesser ampacity when you could adjust that equipment down, provided it meets the restricted access.
Okay. Any questions on that? No?
What does the MRC say right now?
Why don't you walk up the microphone for a minute?
His question was, what does the MRC say about that now? And I'll let somebody from Michigan answer that.
It's not residential involved. You don't have to.
Everybody's looking at me.
I'm looking around.
Remodeling job, yeah. The MRC probably does not address this right currently. And I would have to say that you have to remember there is a provision in the MRC, if you look in the first application, in the first part of that book, it says that anything's not addressed in this book, you can fall back to the NEC. So if it's not specifically addressed, you can go back to whatever the National Electrical Code says. So
2017 say?
I can't speak to that right now. I don't know.
Yeah, the 2017 does not address being able to adjust the setting on the equipment. So that's where there's the advantage of adopting the 2020 NEC.
I'm on that code panel, and Tim's right, it's a big deal to offer this relief, if you want to look at it that way, in certain situations. In that whole article, there's a sort of a tension between what is going to be practical and safe for restricted access locations, meaning that qualified people will be dealing with it, versus homeowners. And that's where this came from, and it will allow for some considerable savings for larger commercial installations.
All right, did that answer your question? Okay. All right, question number 35. You should have hung on to the mic. Huh? You got one more?
This is another relevant question.
I have a contractor that places floor boxes and conduit on top of the vapor barrier for the slab, for slab on grade 4. He states his installation is not in contact with the earth and therefore not defined as a wet location. Do you concur?
This comes under the oh no you don't section of the code. If you look in Article 100 for the definition of locations, a wet location is defined as installations underground or in concrete slabs or masonry in direct contact with the earth, in locations subject to saturation with water or other liquids such as vehicle washing areas, and in unprotected locations. So the fact that the contractor is installing their boxes above the vapor shield really does not mean much here. The idea is that the conduit and J boxes are going to be installed in the concrete slab. So that installation has got to meet requirements for a wet location, meaning the conduit, J boxes, conductors all have to meet requirements for a wet location.
Pretty good with that one? Cool. All right. Now, Scott, it's your turn. Does the coffee maker and the roller dog machines require GFCI protection on the serving counter of a convenience store?
Before I answer that question, this is the last question. I'm going to make it really short, which means you'll be able to get to fill the koozie cups, short of any announcements that we have to go. So if you would just hang on to the announcements from either Don or from Pat Balzano, our current president. So the short answer is there is not GFCI protection required in the 2017 NEC under 210.8.b.2 other than dwelling units. So if you look into 2021, that will change.
Okay. Now, before you rush off, as you said, we've got a little bit of housekeeping. Very first thing I would like you to do is take a moment to thank the panel for coming up and all right.
Okay, just a reminder, we have our social hour and cookout tonight out by the pool area. 6:30 for the social hour, and the cookout will start at 7 o'clock. So See you there. Hospitality rooms up on the 6th floor at the end of the hall.
We got room 6 there. Yeah, there is.
How much are you awake?
I'm awake.